All right. Good afternoon, everyone. And welcome. This is Jim Godfrey, Chair of the CAC, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. Just a reminder for those online, please state your name if you're making a motion or seconding, and for everyone in the room, please make sure your mic is on and use that so that we've got it for record. We have a quorum, so all alternates can vote. Gail, did you want to make an announcement?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Gail Sturdivant, City Engineer, Deputy Public Works Director for City of Colorado Springs. I'd like to take a moment to introduce two colleagues of mine that you have not met and talk about their roles. Sitting to my left is Joshua Palmer. He is the new interim county engineer. So he's going to be with us, and we've started collaborating already and picking back up where we were at the county. Like there was no changes with RTA and other items going on between the city and county. And then I'd also like to introduce one of his colleagues as well, Jeff Manchester. He is the interim deputy county engineer. And there's one other member with the county. I think you guys all know Victoria Chavez. She is here with us today. It's the first time I've actually got to meet Victoria in person today after 2+ years of COVID. So anyway, I just want to introduce our colleagues, our new colleagues that are going to be joining us today.
Great. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Victoria and I go back many years through PPACG back years ago. Yeah, exactly. We don't need to. Visual cues are enough. We don't need to do the math. Yeah. Great. Well, everyone, welcome. So next item on the agenda would be the approval of the agenda. So do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Yeah, this is Dave Zelenak. I'm happy to make the motion.
Okay, Dave, would you second it? Dave, we had a motion in the room. Would you second?
I'd be happy to second it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Thank you very much. All right, item number 3, public comment period for items not on the agenda. Anyone on the committee, online or in the room, want any public comments? Seeing no hands raised. Anyone in the audience have a public comment for an item not on the agenda? Not seeing one, we'll move on. Thank you. Item number 4, approval of minutes of the May 4th meeting. Any additions, corrections? If not, do I hear a motion to approve? Ed Dills approve, make a motion.
Larry Tobias, second.
Larry Tobias, second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Minutes carry. Thank you. Financial reports. Beverly.
Good afternoon. The March sales and use tax income was 13 million, which was 651,000 over the budget and 5.3%. Still doing pretty well. It's funny that January was 5.3% too. On the second page, we were ahead of the monthly budget or the monthly actual of last year by 917,000 or 7.6%. And then the rest of the reports, does anybody have any questions?
I've got just a quick one. I didn't get into the detail as much as I would like to on RTA 1 projects, but where we stand with virtually what money is left from RTA 1, roughly?
Well, if you go to page 3 of the report, you can see that there's 87,000 that the city has left in Mark Shuffle North. And then you see the county ones, there's 120 in Meridian, Mark Shuffle Road, Mesa Ridge, there's 167,000. And then the Peterson, the Mark Shuffle Peterson Air Force Base North again is 38,000, and the 87 from the city and the 38 will be combined. And we keep getting more money from developers for that. So that goes into this pot for any future expenses. So that is what is left.
All right, the reason I was just asking was that as we go forward and start thinking about our messaging for RTA 3, someone finding that we got money from RTA 1 that's been in there 20 years or this kind of thing is having an excuse or having an explanation for what that's for. That's where I'm coming from. Joan?
I'm sorry. Can you pull your microphone closer? I'm having trouble hearing
Sure, no problem.
my deaf ears.
So the reason that I was just asking the question was, as we go forward with our messaging for RTA 3, is to have answers for why we haven't spent all the money for RTA 1. I mean, there's a plan that's out there, it's under contract in most cases and all that kind of thing. And so I just, when I was looking over the stuff, I didn't take the time to do the math. So I appreciate it, Beth.
Yeah, overall, there's 413,000. And really, since we're continuously getting some money from a developer, a couple of developers out there, that's not very much in the
Okay.
whole scheme of things.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
That's good. Any questions for Bev on the financials? All right, midterm budget amendment.
Okay, we'll do a brief overview and then have the member governments present their changes, because this budget amendment is to allocate the amount of 2021 revenue over budget, which on page 1 of the document, the net is 8.9 million. So we'll allocate that and then allocate 6 million at additional 2022 revenue, because we're ahead of budget right now already by 2 million. So that's a fairly conservative figure. Then let's see, going through page 4, 5, and 6, put the budget into an income statement format. And then on pages 5 and 6, you can see each of the project names, and then the revenue, the expenditure carryover, which is the unspent budgeted 2021 amounts, then the carryover where they allocated 2021 revenue carryover in this amendment. Then the 2022 original budget is in the next column, which was approved back in December. And then the additional revenue that we talked about, the $6 million in the next column, then any line item transfers that the member governments make for the total budget. And there are a few line item transfers. It's a good time to do them just to readjust budgets between some of the capital projects. But that is all I have. And Gail, do you want to start off with the cities?
Gail Sturdivant, City of Colorado Springs. My intent is to focus on how we allocated funds and changes, and then if we have questions, we'll go through there. I'm going to start off with the Centennial Boulevard extension. We're proposing to transfer $1 million out of the Airport Road over Spring Creek Bridge project and allocate it toward the Centennial Boulevard project. The Airport Road project is nearing completion, and we see that we have over $1 million in budget available still for that project. So it's time for us to start reallocating those dollars. And why we want to put it in the Centennial project is right now, I may have mentioned this previously, and if I didn't, I apologize. We're looking at a larger change order on the Centennial Boulevard extension project coming up in the very near future. And that change order is going to be driven by, we have currently the project ends on the west side of I-25. We're going to be adding in and having that project extend going underneath the I-25 bridges and ending at the east side of I-25 and the ramps. And the reason why we're adding this in now is, if you recall, we have those two Fontanero bridges that are literally right there just to the east of that location. We weren't in a point, or the Fontanero Bridge project wasn't far enough along to have that tie-in point correctly at the time. Now they are far enough along. We feel like we have a good point. So anyway, that large change order is coming. We're still in negotiations with the contractor on that, but we know it's going to be in that realm of about $1 million. And so wanted to add funds for that. The next one is for the intersection improvements and roadway safety programs. This is where we're going to be putting a bulk of money. As you can see, the new monies that we had from this budget allocations, both from the 21 carryover and the new planned revenue for 2022. There's intended to be split in two forms. One is $500,000 as part of our local match to advance the 31st and Fontanero intersection improvements project. And I say local match, we do have some federal dollars associated with that project. So that will help us get that project going and use those federal dollars. And the other, there's 4.87 million of new monies going into that program with the intent to fund what I hope is the first of a couple different Mark Shuffle Road projects, Mark Shuffle and Barnes intersection improvements. And I will talk about that in a lot more detail here if you could just give me a moment. Then we have pedestrian transportation improvements. We want to move $504,000 into that location, again, to be used as local match for MMOF funding for some additional sidewalks. That constitutes about 25% local match for that MMOF funding for those sidewalk improvements. And those are specifically going to be allocated on Academy near Hancock. And it's kind of filling in some of those sidewalk gaps that we're missing between the two Pprta A-list projects. The next one is the Black Forest Road Improvements Project. We are proposing to move $3 million out of that project right now. That will still give us about $3 million in contingency. I am planning a large change order to come for that project to pick up the tributary work associated, channel tributary work associated with that. But we were successful in obtaining $1.9 million of ARPA funding for that particular activity. So we feel like it's okay to start reducing our contingency on that project and reallocate those $3 million to be used more effectively. And we intend to allocate those $3 million also towards the Mark Shuffle and Barnes intersection project. You can see for the transit programs, we're moving $108,580 from the fixed bus route program to cover ADA paratransit bus program costs. And it's just really additional costs that have been incurred from a transit agency. And if you have questions about that, I know Craig would be happy to discuss that. And there's one more, and I missed this bullet point in the memo, but there is an additional $200,000 that goes in the roadway safety and traffic operations project to help with some additional transportation and safety planning efforts associated with ongoing efforts, both with our overall safety, intersection safety improvement study and Connect COS. So I've mentioned the intersection improvements for Barnes and Mark Shuffle a couple times. If you look at the back of the memo that we provided for our budget, it really highlighted how we've tried to pull monies together to help address a very significant safety concern in our community as we view it. And we've talked about Mark Shuffle Road, I think, many times in many different fashions. Right now, with the plans have progressed from what the county did in 2014 and where we were able to pick them up and advance them and the available right away. We feel like we could come through and do the Mark Shuffle and Barnes intersection improvements now. And that's important. It would be the first phase in a larger project in the future anyway, but really what this does, it gives us the opportunity to improve operations along Mark Shuffle in general in the north-south direction, but it's going to give us a second western egress for Banning Lewis Ranch. As if you've been out in that area, if you know, there's a significant amount of growth on the east side of Colorado Springs. If you're in that Banning Lewis area, really your only point to get out there on that western side is to come up through the Dublin intersection. Also, if you've been out there, you know that is significantly overtaxed right now, and it creates a lot of issues. We also have a school from District 49 that's going to be going in close to the intersection of what's Banning Lewis Ranch and Barnes on the southeast side of this area. With that, there's concerns with citizens driving down there and being somewhat landlocked and not being able to have another egress. So we've been working with the developer as well, that they're advancing the engineering plans for Barnes to extend Barnes over to Mark Shuffle, which is one of their commitments as part of the Banning Lewis Ranch project. But in that, where they need to tie in, it's a pretty different vertical alignment that needs to happen there. So it makes sense for us to go in now, put that project in, allow Barnes to come through, provide a second round of egress for the Banning Lewis Ranch to address an immediate problem. And it also is going to help us with construction, should we be successful with Pprta ballot initiative to do the future phases with Mark Shuffle Road. So you can see from the table, put monies together, both from the Banning Lewis Ranch annexation, some leftover RTA 1 monies, the monies that we just talked about moving into the intersection safety improvement projects. And then there's some other potential fundings as some projects close out with the county and some other developer contributions that we're anticipating coming in to help fund that work. With that being said, we understand and recognize our commitment is 100% to fulfill and complete our A-list projects in advance. So there's actually a couple off ramps built into this should we need them as things progress. First ones that we are anticipating getting the Circle Drive and South Academy construction bids in the next 2 months. In fact, Academy is scheduled, I believe it's June 16th, and Circle will be following fairly shortly, likely in July timeframe. So if we see a huge significant cost increase above the contingencies we've kind of planned in place, we have the ability to back up and do a line item transfer into this project should need be. I've also put in here with this memorandum where I've taken the city's total capital improvement project and looked at some of those major projects that are still out there and added 20% to the overall total cost. And those are highlighted in yellow on the spreadsheet that's attached. And I wanted to demonstrate that even with this change, and if we do see some cost increase of what we're projecting for revenue, we're still anticipating having some contingency left over in monies to apply to the B list. I think that's the best way we can demonstrate right now that we've planned appropriately to address this issue, both from a financial standpoint and understand that we have mechanisms in place to back off if should we need to, and still demonstrate that we can fulfill commitments to the voters. So with that, I would be open to questions. I know I've done a lot of talking, but that's the overall presentation of what we're proposing.
So basically, you increase the contingency on several of those undone projects to account for cost escalation and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, sir.
Right.
And those changes are highlighted in yellow, and they were just a total pure 20% increase. If we look at what we've seen on some line item bids and talking with our partners and see that we're seeing between 18 and 21% general kind of cost escalation right now in some of our bids. Depending on the size of the project, there's been some variability in it, but we're planning for the worst case as far as what we know today.
Are you going to have to forfeit not doing something in order to cover those anticipated additional costs? Did you have to scratch?
Our commitment is not to forfeit doing anything, particularly those projects that are on the A list and activities we currently have programmed within other program funds. Our intent right now is that we've got enough flexibility built in our program in where we can allocate future dollars. We should be able to accomplish all those things with what we know today.
Okay, good.
I have a question.
Larry?
Gail, on your page 10, the second item from the bottom, Old Ranch Road improvements and bridge construction. You've got $3 carryover. Is that correct, or is that a typo?
No, it was correct. I asked the exact same thing. There's some lingering dollars that we'll have to move and clean up.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Gail? Anybody online? Okay. All right. Good information. Thank you. Who's next?
Sure, I can go, yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. So like Gail mentioned, Josh Palmer, I'm the interim county engineer at El Paso County Public Works. So as you can see in our memo, El Paso County has a total of $2.216 million. We are proposing, so that dollar amount includes carryover of 1.38, as well as just under $837,000 in additional revenue. Excuse me. So the county is proposing that we allocate the entire increased revenue to the South Academy Boulevard project. Makes it simple for us. However, if you have read through the first quarter Pprta report, first quarter, we saw the final design complete for that project, and we went through. So we're following through with CDOT on their MAMSIT project on I-25. And the project delivery, which is a CMGC. So we went through the design review and the opinion of probable prices with our consultant, with the CMGC contractor, as well as the independent estimator. We're seeing a little bit of a gap in our budget relative to the scope. So we're working from both ends to make up that budget shortfall, which includes some value engineering, some de-scoping, re-scoping, some design revisions, and trying to find some additional revenue sources. So this came at a very opportune time. So our proposal is to reallocate the entire amount to the South Academy Boulevard project.
Okay.
Question, Josh.
Sure.
On that South Academy project, that $2.2 million that you want to transfer, I've heard that there is a fairly large cost difference between design and construction costs. And how close is that 2.2 million to covering that difference, or will we see additional requests or transfers in the future to cover that project?
Our goal is to not request any additional money. So there actually was a pretty significant delta in our estimate relative. So our design consultant came back with a relatively similar estimate, but the contractor and the independent estimator came back as almost a $20 million delta between our estimate and the actual cost. So we contribute a lot of that to it's a couple years ago it was COVID, and now it's supply chain and material costs and increase in labor. So I attribute a lot to that. So we're working with the contractor now, or the consultant now, to rescope, to do some value engineering. So I think that we're probably in the ballpark $12 to $16 million range in rescoping and value engineering. We're looking to try to come up with some additional funds, and this $2 million is going to get us pretty close, we believe. It's still in the early stages with our consultant, but I don't anticipate, and my goal is to not to ask for any additional money, revenue or otherwise, to make up that difference.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for Josh on the county's piece of this? Okay, you want to do Metro?
So Craig's here.
Welcome, Greg.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Craig Blewett, Transit Services Manager, and it's good to be here in front of the CAC. The amount of the budget amendment for transit is an additional $678,000, just short of that. We propose to use this amendment funding for 3 service improvements. Increase the service hours on Route 35 on weekdays and add service on Saturdays. Route 35 goes along Las Vegas Street down to our transfer center at Pikes Peak Community College South. This service is within the unincorporated area of the county, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute. Second service to be improved is to extend the service hours on Independence Day, 4th of July, to support community special events. And this would apply to all routes system-wide that operate in the evenings. And we'll extend that service by 2 hours, meaning the routes will run until about 11:30 at night on that one night. So people can go see fireworks and other events around the community and get home afterwards. And then third service to be improved is improve Route 3, which goes along Colorado Avenue here out to Manitou Springs. And on weekday service go from 30 minutes to 15-minute headways frequencies which is outstanding service. And this is a good high ridership route. Talk just about another second on our improvements to Route 35. The additional hours are the key aspect of that route is it serves the El Paso County Jail and also the halfway house next to the jail. The halfway house is where some lower risk inmates stay, and it's where other inmates go in between incarceration and being fully released. We met with the county sheriff's office a few weeks ago, and they asked if we could extend the hours for this route for the halfway house residents to get to and from jobs. That, of course, being a key part of the rehabilitation process, so residents can successfully return to being productive citizens and hopefully not become repeat offenders. Currently, the route has a 3-hour break in the middle of the day, and it does not operate on evenings or weekends. And currently it runs from the Pikes Peak Community College Transfer Center north to the jail. We're going to eliminate the 3-hour gap during the day and extend the hours into the evening to around 9:30 p.m. And we'll also add service on Saturdays. And according to the sheriff's office, this should cover most of the job travel needs of those halfway house residents. Finally, that route will be extended north up to the Alta Hotel. That's formerly the Elegante Hotel at Circle and Janitel. That hotel is being converted to affordable housing. So the extension will give the route a proper turnaround on the north, serve additional ridership generators, and provide a connection to another route, Route 15, that goes east-west from there. So it's going to be a general improvement for that route and hopefully better serve, in particular, the halfway house as well as some affordable housing. And so our total, the cost of that is noted in our memo is $762,000 a year. That's more than the $678,000, and that $84,000 difference will be funded using Transit's carryover, operating carryover. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Will that extension north impact helping the high school there too, or is it?
You know, it could. I think it's in that general area. So yes, it could. Yes.
It's Mitchell, right? Mitchell has
Harrison High School.
yeah,
Yeah,
Harrison.
yeah, that's within walking distance.
Yeah. Any other questions for Greg on transit? Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, Dolger Bennett, city engineer for Manitou Springs. Let Jessica pull it up here. This is basically what we're showing. We continue to track well on our projects. Our big Manitou Avenue, we call it our MAPS job. It's also been called our 5C job. We just reached a major milestone with that this weekend. We got a major portion paved out and opened back up for traffic before Memorial Day. A contractor called me and asked me how happy I was with him on a scale of 1 to 10. And I said 8.5, and he goes, "That's it." So anyway, that was a big milestone for our city. We're making great progress. We expect to wrap that major job up in the next month or so. So any questions?
Any questions for Manitou? All right, good. Good job. Thanks.
I think Cindy's on the Zoom. If you could do the Rama and Calhan presentations.
Okay, I unmuted. So, Rama, we added some, we've been holding off spending our maintenance budget just because we have had a project that is just taking forever, but we're still planning on using part of that. And then we've got some trees that have been flowing over the road. So we're going to work on that this summer as well. But that's about it for Rama. No?
No. Okay.
Calhan, we're just excited to have more money. So we're going to keep it going. We're looking at street signs. And in fact, I think Bruce talked to Gail yesterday about hoping maybe Colorado Springs can help us, but we're ordering some signs and we're going to do some pothole repairs this summer as well.
All right.
And that's all. Okay.
Any questions for Cindy on Calhan or Rama? Thank you, Miss Cindy. Don't forget to turn your hat back around sideways when you're talking to Rama or
Yeah.
Callahan, so we know.
Thanks.
All right.
Okay, so there's Green Mountain Falls left, and I don't know, Craig, if you want to talk about it, or do you want me to just go over the memo? Okay, so that's page 21, and Becky Frank is the new town manager. And she put together this memo. And their total maintenance budget with carryover is $87,194. And they'll use it for their usual road repair. Then the only project left in their capital portion are the stilling basins. So all the money that they've been allocated over the last few years is going into stilling basins. And I believe they're working on those right now. Are there any questions?
All right.
Okay, that's the end of the presentations. Are there any questions overall on the budget?
Any questions from anyone? Okay.
Then a motion to recommend approval
Yes.
would be in order.
Did I hear a motion to recommend approval of the budget, amended budget as presented to the board?
Rick Hoover, approve.
Okay, got a Ed Dill's second. Any further discussion? Not seeing anyone. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, motion carries for positive recommendation to the board.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Keep the money flowing. Item number 6, 2022 capital maintenance and public transportation contracts, city, Gail.
Yes, Gail Sturdivant, once again, the city will be presenting 6 contracts for the CAC's consideration to get today. The first contract is for the Circle Drive Bridge Replacement Project to bring our construction management team on board. This initial award is for Benish. It's in the amount of $2,120,172. When I say initial, because it was important for us to not overcommit funds for construction management this time before we have a construction contractor on place. This initial contract is in place and intended to cover 18 months worth of construction. Based on our construction documents, depending on the contractor's means and methods and supply chain availability, the duration could last up to 30 months, but we wanted to give ourselves the ability to have more control and flexibility as needed to appropriately manage that contract. We did go through an RFP process and we did have 2 respondents, and Benish was the selected. I will mention just a side note, we are in the middle of pre-qualifying contractors. We have 6 proposals in right now, and as soon as they determine that they're all qualified, we will be issuing an invitation to bid for the Circle Drive bridges. So hopefully we'll see that here soon, likely in your August board packet. The next contract is for the Black Forest Road widening. This is an initial estimate contract for Mountain View Electric for utility relocations that is required to be reimbursed as part of the Black Forest Road project. As we have final costs, the installation in the contract of value will be finalized. That initial estimate is for $1,337,218.36. Any questions? All right. The city's third contract is for a concrete assessment for the city's downtown area, specifically in the downtown business improvement district. The city went through and used our RFPs to establish our on-call contracts and predetermined rates to establish this contract. It's with Basis Partners in the amount of $233,310. Questions on that one?
Yeah, could you expand just a little bit on the principle behind that contract, please?
Well, I will do my best, and if need be, I'll ask Corey Farkas to jump in, who's here in the audience with us.
Okay.
So as we go through and do overlay, any kind of overlay projects or any kind of planning pieces for concrete repairs, we go through and do an assessment and really determine the quality of like the curb and gutter or the ramps. We also look for ADA compliance. So this is an area where they're going through and doing an overall evaluation of the condition of the concrete to determine what may need to be addressed as we come through and do additional concrete activities. Maintenance. Did I get it all, Corey? Anything you'd like to add? Sure. Okay. Does that answer your question, Rick?
Yeah, sure does. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. The fourth contract is for Pprta asphalt overlay maintenance contracts. The city did go out through an RFP process. We got 3 bids. As you can see, the bids are listed in your contract. We currently only have $5 million budgeted for this activity. As you can see, the bids were all over that amount. We did issue a best and final offer request for those asphalt providers. Schmidt Construction did come in as our lowest bid, so we are intending to enter into a contract with them, but limiting the amount to $5 million versus the $7.6 million shown on your sheet. And how we're doing that is just basically reducing the pavement list and what we had in the original scope.
Just for clarity, in case someone asked or you don't remember, this overlay is not part of 2C and in addition to what 2C is doing, so that it's clear in your mind, this is city worker overlay project.
This is not city performed work, it's still contracted, but separate from 2C,
Separate,
just for
yes.
that clarification.
Thank you.
And I say that only because we do have city workers who do use Pprta money to do overlay, in-house overlay efforts. And as you recall, we brought a lot of contracts for them to get in-house materials in the last couple months. Our next contract is also maintenance contract is for our Pprta chip seal program. We have gone through an RFP process in the past. It's a multi-year contract. This was our second option year for A1 chip seal. As you can imagine, we did have to go through a best and final offer to establish pricing and well, just because of the material cost changes. We did make an adjustment with them. We feel like it's an equitable change and it's results in a 14% increase over our unit costs from last year. We are intending to put the contract in place with A1 chip seal in the amount of $1,676,136.74. Questions on that one? Yes.
Gail, not so much on this one, but on a couple of them. You know, it's hard enough to get down to an even dollar, but I have to ask the question. How do you come up with 74 cents?
Okay, so I can't answer the Mountain View Electric one because I noticed the same thing, but on this one, you know, what we get is a unit cost and we give them a certain number of units. So it's just real straight multiplication and addition. They don't round up and have total round numbers because they're down to the penny on some of these guys to be competitive.
Okay.
Whether it's easy to deal with or not, I understand the frustration. We tend to like to use round numbers, but that's not always the way we get bids.
You're doing a good job. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Our last contract for consideration is our annual maintenance renewal for the cost of the Centric software. If you recall, for the Centric is what the city has previously been using for construction management software. We are going to be transitioning to Masterworks through that contract that was approved in February, but we do need to have some overlapping time. This maintenance contract would be in the amount of $29,760 for Centric Software Incorporated to help us bridge that gap as we transition between softwares for project and construction management. And those are the city's contracts. I'm available for questions and I appreciate your consideration.
Mr. Chair, this is Dave Zelenak. I had a quick question for Mr. Devine, if I may.
Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you. The question I had for you is on the previous one there, the Pprta chip seal program. I would just like to say, and many of you have heard me say this before, I'm a big fan of not just chip seals, but all bituminous surface treatments in general. Preventive maintenance, I think, is a huge, has a 10-to-1 or maybe a 20-to-1 payback So I'd love to see us do every bit of that we can. And the question I had for you, Gail, maybe this is more aimed in Corey's direction. I know that there's been some discussion, some consideration of not just chip seal, which is one of several very excellent bituminous surface treatments, but also cape seals, slurry seals. I know that the program is called chip seal. Is it specifically exactly chip seal, or will this cover other arguably more productive, more beneficial bituminous surface treatments, or is it quite literally just chip seal?
Okay, this one is just chip seal. I will let you know, we have been evaluated and plan on standing up a program for a slurry mix pavement restoration to help with maintenance, but we agree with your sentiments on looking at all of our range of options for maintenance on our pavement to extend its life.
So hopefully in the future, there may be a slurry seal program in addition to chip seal.
Yeah, that's our intent. And in fact, we even considered putting it in place mid-year this year, but just with some adjustments we had to make overall budgets and maintenance wise, felt like we just needed to be prepared to stand it up for 2023.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you. That's good to know. So chip seal means chip seal. That's good to know.
All right. Any other questions for Gail and the city's projects? All right, Manitou. Oh, I'm sorry. We should take a vote. I apologize. No further questions for Gail on the city projects. Do I have a motion
I
to?
move approve.
Okay, Richard, a move.
I second.
All right, and second by Scott. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say aye. Nay. No opposed. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Now it's your turn. Oh. There we go.
Okay, we're basically doing some paving up on 3 kind of minor roads up in the hills of Manitou Springs. Looking to use those dollars, and that area is also our main route to our water treatment plant, so it gets a lot of use. We're also getting ready to build a fire training tower up there, and so we want to make sure the road is in good shape as we start hauling materials up there. So that's what this is for.
Okay. Any questions? All right, seeing none. Do I have a motion to make a positive recommendation for Manitou's request?
So moved. I'd like to move approval.
Ed Dill, second. Okay, Dave on the nomination. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item number 7A, Transit Services Monthly Update. Welcome back.
Well, thank you. Again, Craig Blewett, Transit Services Manager with the city. Our monthly report is in your agenda packet. Just a couple things to highlight. With our local bus route system, ridership was up 5% in April of this year compared to the same month last year. Our ADA paratransit service, it was up 26% compared to April of last year. And it should be noted that that service, our ADA paratransit service, is almost fully back to where it was pre-pandemic.
Good.
It's at 91% of where it was. So that service has come back. I guess in comparison to that, our taxi choice program is not doing so well. But that's attributed more to the performance of the taxi company than anything else. It is an option, so ADA paratransit customers have the option to use a taxi choice. It's not being chosen as much as it was before the pandemic. On the van pool side, we're still well below pre-pandemic levels, but we did see an increase of 9.4% compared to the year before. When we have fewer riders, we also have fewer vans running. We do have a minimum number of passengers per van, and so our efficiency is still there. I believe it's a 7-seat van. I believe it's 4 or 5 is the minimum. And we also have some larger vans that have a higher minimum. So we are sustaining that minimum. So the efficiency is still there. We're just running fewer vans. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Any questions for Craig? I understand that you're a short timer.
So yeah, I've announced my retirement after 37 years with the city. I'm retiring later this month. It's now June, I guess. So yeah, later this month. So looking forward to that.
Well, we want to, on behalf of myself and won't speak for anyone else, but thank you for all the great work you and your staff have done. We've come a long ways in public transit over the years, and you've been very upright and forth in terms of what's going on and what issues are, and wish you the best, Greg.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you very much. Couple
Yeah,
questions.
just like to echo that sentiment. Craig, you've left quite a legacy and have done an extraordinary job for so many, many years. You will be missed, and your legacy, I'm sure, will carry on for decades. Craig, nice job. Good work. Good luck to you. Godspeed.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Joan?
Craig, congratulations. Enjoy retirement. I can tell you it's wonderful. It's the best thing that ever happens in life. You can throw out the alarm clock and just enjoy. So good luck to you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Richard?
I would like to compliment you on the number of years of service. You deserve a medal for that. I've only been here about 3 years on this, but I think, and you have a terribly difficult job, and you're doing your best, and your staff, I'm sure, is the same. And you're making progress, and it's just though I'm a highway person, I recognize the importance of mass transit and the various components that you have. So I just admire your efforts, and I know the frustration level has to be high because of you've told us about the difficulty of getting qualified people to come there to drive the various vehicles that you use. So again, all my best, and enjoy retirement. Or you might do like I did. Try to get on the Pprta. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe not. Yeah, maybe not.
Maybe after a couple months. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I would just say that, transit is one of the things that really makes cities work, really makes communities work. And we've made a lot of progress during my time here, but there's still much to be done. And I can tell you that my colleagues back at my office, soon to not be my ex-office, are going to do everything they can to keep moving things forward. So really appreciate the comments. I also say I didn't come to this meeting just to get these comments and accolades, but Brian Vituli is actually on vacation this week. So I'm stepping to fill for Brian, and I really appreciate
Big
your comments.
shoes, yes. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
one thing about Greg, this is Rick Cooper. We go back many years.
Hey, Craig. Rick Hoover's talking to you. Go ahead, Rick.
I said, we go back many years. And some of our discussions have been somewhat contentious, but I've always appreciated how professional you've been in all the activities and the different things we've been involved in. I wish you the very best and Godspeed, and good luck.
Well, thanks, Rick. And please know that I've always appreciated working with you as well. You've always been very respectful, I think, of the professionals, of the process. And that is always very, very much appreciated. So thank you.
All right, anyone else? All right. Let's move on to item 7B, PPRT 3 capital projects list. Is where Gail go? Oh, Rick?
This is the second monthly review. That the first was at the May CAC board. This is the second review in June, and then the third will be in the July 6 CAC and July 13 board meetings. Several of the member entities have submitted revisions. So I think, I don't think we'll be able to take the city first, but might want to start with the county. And I know Rama has changed. Greenmount Falls, Craig, you might want to comment that's probably going to change. So the 30 seconds I took allowed Gail to return so that she could cover any revisions that she wants to. Mr. Chair, I assume you want to take city first and just proceed in the order of large to small as it's listed on the page.
Yeah, that works. Just go the order of our packet here. So, Gail?
Thank you. And apologize for being a bit tardy. I appreciate you still in there, Rick. So the city did submit the proposed project list along with a cover memo that showed 26 named projects in the 21 programs. Since we've submitted that memo, but let me stay on the first one to start with. With that memo, we also had some critical projects that were still considered in that AB list. So we continue to do an evaluation of those 3 projects. It's the Woodman Road improvements, the Fillmore Bridges, the construction dollars for Fillmore Bridges, and also a project on Old Ranch Road. Since we've submitted these documents, we've continued to learn more information, and the county may need to talk about it some more as well. But we're very concerned with some of the new greenhouse gas regulations that we are likely going to lose the federal funding we currently have, or it's at least in jeopardy of losing the federal funding we have for the Woodman Road improvements. Outside of PPRTA, we go and capture other dollars. We do currently have STBG monies, or it's a surface transportation bond grant monies for all the engineering work on Woodman Road that would run from Powers to US 24. And we did that in collaboration with the county. And then the first round of construction dollars were also planned in the TIP, and that would be from Powers to Black Forest Road. Unfortunately, those dollars fall in fiscal years 25, 26, and 27. And when the Pikes Peak area will be impacted by the greenhouse gas regulations will be in 25. And even though that project is in our long range plan and should be included in our model, as we have to show reductions, or if we can't show reductions or enough mitigation, we're concerned that those funds are likely in jeopardy. Through both the city's transportation plan, and I know with the counties as well, we recognize that Woodman Road does need to have some enhancements, and they've been planned for years. It's just now it's time to pull the trigger, and we may have some issues with it. So long story short, we had to come up with an alternate way to fund this. So we are proposing this project with a joint project with the city and county that it's been flexing back and forth a little bit between the A and the B list, that we do put it on the A list. And to try to fiscally constrain the rest of our project lists, we've also started looking at reducing the scope. Reducing the scope only from what you see reflected in my cost planning, which is on the supplemental memo that I had handed out. And I say that because we still are hopeful we can go and capture other dollars, but if we can't, the areas that we have scoped out, let's hope we can go and capture. And give us, the way it's written, it's give us the ability to be flexible in the future if we need be, because here we are 12 years out from the end of PPRTA. We don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of years. So we've kind of built that and feel like it needs to move to the A list. Likewise, the Fillmore Bridges, we've talked about this, and I think some of those have been around the CAC for a while. There's been condition concerns. In fact, Jim, I think it might have been you who brought up, you remember when they did inclinometer sensitivity just to see what there's movement on those bridges. Right now, today, the good news is the bridges are very stable, that we aren't having a movement, but we do have some deck condition issues and some other things. But as we started digging into, and I've got some other bridge experts looking at it right now, the way they're sitting now, if they start to deteriorate, they're going to go quickly. And so we want to make sure we're prepared. So we felt like just from a risk standpoint for our community, we actually had to elevate those to the A list. I still think there's an opportunity we might be able to capture federal funding, the monies that are in Woodman Road, maybe they can go for those bridges. We'll have to wait and see in the future. And I felt like we need to make sure we at least had the ability to get them done because we feel like it's a critical safety issue for the community. The third one that's mentioned in my original memo was Old Ranch Road. We do see a lot of traffic volume in that area. It is a very unsophisticated rural section. That being said, it's a drop off. There's no shoulder. The good news is though, if you're in that area and you tend to use Old Ranch Road, you have multiple other egress routes. So we felt like that was a lower priority for our citizens in compared to some of the other critical issues we have in there. So we're proposing to move that to the B list. So kind of coming back to the memo I passed out, I talked a lot about the Woodman Road project already. But as I go and look at physical
You
constraints,
talking about the map?
no, that's not my map. That's the county's.
Oh, okay.
No,
Oh,
I'm looking
okay.
at my memo. I just
All
want to
right.
make sure I hit.
Oh,
So
I got it.
I just wanted to kind of understand some of the thought process and discussions we're having and why we're making some of the decisions. So then we have to go and physically constrain our A list. Thus far, the board has directed us to use 75% of the planned revenue that would be allocated to the city. And that was our goal to achieve that. You could see though, that even with these changes, we made some critical projects up. We've dropped 4 projects and they're in that memo that was handed out today. The first one is the Mark Shuffle Road Bridge over Cottonwood Creek. That would be a new bridge that we were anticipating putting in place in this next 12-year planning horizon to complete that connection to Mark Shuffle as it ties into to research.
Aren't we already doing that bridge?
No, you did the bridge over Sand Creek.
Sand Creek. Got it.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
So we're right now we're planning on dropping that. I already mentioned Old Ranch Road again, that we dropped that down to our B list. We had hoped to advance the engineering for the Platte Avenue widening and shared use path. Again, originally thinking that if we got that project ready, that it could be eligible for federal funding. Unfortunately, with the word widening, even with the shared use path, with the way regulations are today, we don't see that being able to advance. We don't think that was maybe our wisest choice with what we know today. And the construction dollars associated with that project, which were already on the B list, are fairly significant. So it couldn't be done without a federal assistance. And then the last project, and this is one we really did not want to give up on but it needs to happen, is the Woodman Road multimodal improvements from Orchard Valley Road to Rock Rimmon. And this was a significant widening to add bike facilities and sidewalks from what you have out there today. We'll let you know as we're going through, and I believe, and of course, Corey left me, I believe it's a 2C project. There is going to be some minor widening out there as far as 2C, just to get some shoulders out there. So it will be safer than it is today and provide some more options, but we don't feel like we can advance with that multimodal project at this point in time.
So when you're considering widening that, you should consider 2 things. One, a high-speed motorcycle lane. For the drag
With your
race-
name on it? Or
No,
just
no,
kidding.
no. For the drag racing that goes on from that stretch of road, and wildlife mitigation, so that those guys don't hit the things and
Yeah.
get hit. But so put a high-speed motorcycle lane, maybe not a bike lane.
I'm going to let you tell the citizens that live out there, Jim. So with that being said, that would result in 23 named projects and 21 programs. And that still only gets us to 80.2, if I remember. I can't read my, just 80.2% of the planned revenue being allocated to the city. So we still thought we were trying to provide a compromise because we feel confident we're going to be able to go capture other dollars in some fashion. But this is the plan we'd like to present to the board next week for their consideration and direction. And we'd be happy to hear comments and questions from the CAC.
Any questions on Gail's revised memo or the project list that was presented in your project? All right. Good job. Thank you, Gail. I like the second version that had the description of what you were planning on it. That helped a lot, so thank you. Get it. All right. Who is next? County? El Paso County. Yes, sir.
So like Gail mentioned, there's been a lot of changes and updates, and even in the last couple days, the last minute, we provided this handout, which is the map that shows all the proposed PPRTA extension projects for the county, for your reference. The county has, I mentioned over the last couple of days, been really working internally with the other jurisdiction members, specifically City of Colorado Springs, to identify ways in which we can adequately prepare and present projects that fall within our fiscal constraints. We have 17, well, I guess 14 projects, 3 programs that are currently fall on our A list. And there are 2, as you can see on the second page of our list, Eastonville Road, and then like Gail mentioned, Woodman Road. These are 2 projects that kind of been on the fence. We recognize their importance, but they based on the recommended estimating of 75% of the revenue projections did not quite make the cut. Question right off the bat.
I hate to start your visit with us with perhaps a hard question. I think the answer may be very easy, but it's unpleasant. Reading in your memo, it says, and the county is using 75% of the revenue. If I'm, and I may be mistaken, I thought, I know that the HAC at its meeting passed a resolution encouraging the county to use, I believe, about 82%. And that, I assume, went to our county commissioners. I don't know. But I know that you are still showing 75%. So was it disapproved?
Nope. I think the last paragraph there of the memo does mention our proposal to use 83%. Yeah. So that's how we would officially move these 2 projects onto the A list and
Good.
ensure that
Good.
they would
Thank
get
you.
done.
I should have read better. I appreciate it.
I think it's advice we can all take. So that's what we're proposing right now. I think I wasn't around for PPRTA 2, but I think one of the differences this year, and that one of the things we've really appreciated, is the money that was set aside for us to get more accurate cost estimations from our consultant. So we took those estimations and we've really, over the last several weeks, gone through those. We've revised the scope. We've reduced the limits, both literally and figuratively, of the projects, revised some of the scopes, broken some projects up into segments that we can maybe assign as revenue is realized. We're still finalizing the estimates to try to make sure that we have enough contingency to ensure that we are able to complete all of these 8 projects. But this is the list that we're proposing 14 projects, 3 of them programs, and be 2 additional ones if our proposal to use 83% of the projected revenue as an estimating tool is something that is recommended by this board.
Okay. It would look like a pretty good list.
And I brought Victoria with me, and she's able to answer any questions, which are probably maybe many that I'm not able to answer. So always got to make sure you bring smarter people along with you.
Yeah. Go ahead, Larry.
Josh, on the Eastonville Road project, are we still on for doing part of that project under PPRTA 2?
Correct. Yeah. So I think we currently have 14.5 million budgeted for that project. 1.5 right now has been appropriated for the design. So we have a design consultant on board, and our initial contract had them doing the entire design, I believe, from McLaughlin all the way to Latigo. What we did though, realizing that that limited budget may not allow us to construct everything, is we are revising our contract with that consultant to perform the design and task. So the middle portion from, I think it's Bandonero to Londonderry, I believe is a portion that we're going to focus on, which would be phase 1 for design and construction. If we realize some additional dollars, and that's one of the projects that's kind of on the cusp here, was adding PPRTA $3 to complete the construction for that overall design. So we have the consultant on board doing the design. They'll start design on the middle portion and then work to phase 2, which would be the southern segment, and then any additional design support north of Londonderry in conjunction with some of the development that's going on up there. So we're revising our contract to be task-based, so we can assign tasks based on whether or not we realize any additional construction dollars.
So it's critical in a sense, and this goes back to our Zoom meeting we had, just a few days ago, is that to move the utilizing 83% of the estimated value to get a couple of these major projects like Woodman and Eastonville into the A list, so that we know that, we have a good chance of completing those projects, which are major. Well, one of them's east-west, one of them's north-south.
That's correct. Yeah, we want to make sure our goal is to get those onto the A list so that we can get those done. And we feel pretty confident, and Victoria spent a bit of time going through some historical data to kind of lend credence and support to our comfort level with using 83% versus 75%.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions for the county's round 2 of the list? Okay, thank you, Josh. Good job. All right, number 3, Manitou. Greg, you going to try to talk to that one? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Okay, you guys might remember that we presented our proposed ballot language at our last meeting, and the CAC asked us to come back with additional clarification and some additional adjustments. So what you have in front of you is our proposed languages on that. And you can see in the first item that we are going to put a high-speed motorcycle lane on Manitou Avenue as well. All joking aside, we separated out our A-list programs from Manitou Avenue specific to basically everything but Manitou Avenue. Both of those roadway networks have unique needs, and so it allows us to hopefully identify that more accurately. And then we also added in a project for Serpentine Drive, which when we first met, Manitou was unable to do that, but we have since, as a city, acquired that parcel. That was critical. So now that we own the land, we actually can do a project on there. So we've added that as a specific project.
Serpentine's the one that goes up real steep and round and over.
Correct. It goes right by Rainbow Falls, and it's actually enabled us to have quite a few conversations now with El Paso County Parks about trying to do connectivity through there for the Creek Walk Trail. So.
Rick.
Bill, I just wanted to clarify and get a thumbs up from you that the expectation of the CAC and the board would be just to use the first line of each of the descriptors. For example, Manitou Avenue Safety and Mobility Improvements Phase 1, that one line would be all that's on the ballot. Everything below that indented is just supporting details, but would not be on the ballot. Same thing for Manitou Street System and for Serpentine Drive.
That's correct.
Thanks for that clarification. Yep. Okay. You want to hit the B list projects?
Our B list is the same as our A list minus the Serpentine. And we did some research as we went into this revision with you all. And this is very similar to our RTA2 list. We had one specific project, and then we had 2 programs listed. And so we're kind of continuing that framework. And so this is kind of our proposal.
Okay. Any questions on Manitou?
Mr.
Anybody
Chair, if I
online?
may?
Dave, go ahead.
Dole, this is exactly what I think many of us were hoping to see last month. So thank you for taking the time. Thank you for the revisions, for the clarifications, and for making these adjustments. This, I think, is exactly spot on. The kind of detail that we think the voters appreciate having, they've become accustomed to across the region. And I just want to congratulate and compliment you and your staff for what I think is a job well done. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, any other questions on Manitou? All right, great, thanks. Thanks, Joel,
you.
appreciate it. Cindy, you want to cover Callahan and Rama?
Sure. Well, Calhoun's easy. We haven't changed anything. I know it's a lonely list, one on each, but for the money, that's what we want to do. The 8th
Okay.
Street. Yep. So no changes.
Switch your hat around and talk about Rama. while we-
So Rama, we did make one change after the PPRTA board. They talked about our sewer and, you know, just conversation about private road, utility road, public road. So we just removed it from our list. We will work on that ourselves. So our A list now is just improvements to our brush dump road. Basically, that's a ugly dirt road to the brush dump that we offer to all of our citizens. So as much improvements as we can do to that road with our budget is what we're planning.
Okay. Any questions for Cindy? All right, thank you, Cindy.
Thanks.
Green Mountain Falls.
Okay. I did meet with the mayor, the town manager, and the town's sort of on-call engineer yesterday. We reviewed the list, broke it out into A and B priorities, came up with some descriptions to the list here, to each of the projects, added the word avenue to UPass so that no one got confused and thought that we were going to be contributing to CDOT maintaining Highway 24. And we also, our engineer is now looking at costing on all of these projects. So that will go to the board. For those of you who don't know, our board of trustees is 3/5 brand new within the last 30 days. The town manager is new, the town clerk is new. So practically no one that was involved in putting this list together back in August is still around. So this will go back to the board toward the end of June, and all of those revisions will show up then on the third review in the beginning of July.
Thank you, Craig. Any questions on Green Mountain Falls? All right. Any other questions in general? Dave, you got a hand up or is it left over?
Oh, that's a hangover. I'm so sorry. There's a hangover from my
No problem.
to Dole from his last excellent input. So my apologies there. Hands down. Thank you. He wins hands down.
All right, Rick, you had some?
Well, I think the applicable motion would be recommend approval of the second revision. As I'll explain later, the board isn't approving the list yet, but I think if the CAC feels so moved to have a motion approving the second review stage.
Okay, any questions from anyone? Go ahead.
So we had our two largest agencies proposing or considering proposing budgets that are over 75% of the projected revenue. And I know this second capital list has gone pretty well as far as revenue goes, but I remember the first A list, we had that recession in 2008. And if it hadn't been for the city getting a Tiger grant for Woodman Academy, I'm not sure we would have finished the A list. So I'm a little nervous about us having our two largest agencies proposing to go above that 75% threshold.
Okay. That was Scott. Yeah, I made note of that too, but there was some discussion at the board between Bev and the board, I believe, on the percentage thing. What didn't we have? Wasn't there some discussion last month about that percentage number?
Well, the board approved the revenue estimates a couple months ago with the 75%. So they'd have to review that this next week. And then if we do go to 83%, then all the member governments should go to 83%. And they may be able to do that anyway because they have programs in their projects. And they might choose to just say, we're going to keep the list the same and we'll allocate any additional revenues to some of the programs. But it's kind of, it should go, that 83% should be approved by the board in order to have these lists go on the ballot measure, just because the 75% was approved prior to this.
Right, okay. So I'll make a note of that, Scott. Does anyone else mind if I mention that comment during my brief to the board? Richard?
I don't mind your mentioning it, but I would like to point out that the sales tax revenue continues to, last year, it was significantly higher than our budget amount. And this year it is continuing that. And I believe that that is going to continue. And that is why, in part, why the HAC voted to ask the El Paso County Board of County Commissioners to consider going to that level.
Yeah, there's one thing that in this increase in revenue over years past that is permanent, and that is the sales tax of online sales. And so that is an additional source of funding, correct, Beth? And so the increased spending will be driven by the inflation and the economy, but we are getting an extra stream from online sales, right?
For sure. And then we have a lot of inflation right now, but if inflation dips, then that could change that. The thing here is it's just a structure in order for the member governments to come up with their lists. And they're restricted by the economics of this revenue estimate, right? But they're trying to get better estimates on costs right now, which we're doing something different this time. We've hired engineering firms and that should help, but you also have to realize that these costs are going to go up. Possibly if inflation goes up and our revenue goes up because of inflation, so are the costs. This is just a structure in order for them to, be able to figure about where the line should be.
Right.
And the only thing there, I don't think it's a big deal between 75 and 83%. It's just that all the member governments should be working with the same revenue estimates. And right now, these are at 75%. So if the board decides to go to 83%, I'll just redo this revenue estimate so that the other member governments can change their project list, or like I said, they might decide to just not change it and put the kind of additional revenue into a program, capital program.
Okay.
So I don't think it's a huge deal.
Okay. Thank you. All right, any further discussion on PPRTA 3 project list?
I just have one quick thing. I think Scott's comment should be used at the board meeting simply to be considered. But I think the other thing we might want to look at is our projection of growth. The county continues to grow substantially, and that might help offset the effect of inflation against our contracts.
True, good point. Mike, you have a hand up?
Yes, I do. My name is Mike Anderson. I'm with the Historic Neighborhoods Partnership in Colorado Springs. And I have a couple of questions regarding 3 projects. Is this the appropriate time for me to ask those questions?
Sure.
The first one has to do with the 4 projects regarding the reconstruction of Nevada Avenue. I think that's projects P 335 through 338. There are 4 of them. This is kind of baffling to me that the cost of those 4 projects is about $108 million. And that's for the reconstruction of Nevada between the Rock Island Railway and University Village Avenue, I guess is what it's called. That segment of roadway is only 2.2 miles. And in the materials today, it has that average cost or the total cost of $108.1 million. When you do the math, that works out to be about $49 million a mile. The Renew North Nevada transportation plan doesn't call for any, additions of grade separations. There are no grade separations on that segment of roadway. And in fact, the Renew North Nevada plan doesn't call for any kind of widening or capacity enhancements to that segment of roadway. So 49 million seems very, very high for just 2.2 miles of roadway. So the question is, why is that cost so high? That's the first question. Would you like me to list the other 2 that I have as well?
Gail? Yeah, I'd give her a
Yes,
chance.
please, that gives me a moment to pull some other materials up that I'll want.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mike.
The second question has to do with the Constitution Avenue extension feasibility study. And this actually is a question for Gail, and I see that Todd Frisbee is on the line also. It's probably a question for him. But this is obviously $2.5 million for a feasibility study to extend Constitution to connect it to I-25. We all know the history of that roadway. But the question that we have is whether or not all of the city's transportation planning, specifically its Connect COS corridor recommendations, do all those recommendations assume that Constitution is going to be connected to I-25? In other words, did the regional transportation planning for Connect COS assume that Constitution is punched through to I-25? And the reason we're asking that question, if indeed that's the case, why is this a feasibility study, and why isn't it just initial project planning versus a feasibility study? I mean, we all know that connecting Constitution has, could have major implications for the transportation grid and structuring Colorado Springs and traffic patterns immensely. So we're wondering, and we've asked this question of the Connect COS folks, and we haven't gotten a clear answer. The third question that we have relates to the Platte Avenue and Boulder Street Improvements Project between Wasatch and Circle, which has a cost of an estimated cost of $55 million. And we're wondering if that $55 million, which one of the alternatives, there are 2 or 3 alternatives being presently considered for Platte Avenue for that section. And we're trying to figure out which one of those alternatives is being utilized in generating that $55 million estimate. And the reason we're asking that question is we think transparency for voters, we think is definitely essential. And we want to make sure that everybody understands what project really is on this list and what voters are going to be asked to approve. I guess all three of those are for Gail to an extent.
Yes. Yeah, and I think I'll be able to address all three. And then I'm actually trying to pull some materials up on the first one about North Nevada. And it's kind of hard because I'm not on our network, so I apologize, Mike. But in general, the same engineering team that did both the North Nevada study and the conceptual plans, they actually came through and did the cost estimate for that work. One of the things you may not realize that it includes that there's structures in there, there's a new drainage system that needs to go in, there'll be utility relocations, reconstruction of the pavement. There's a significant amount of work. And then we also look at escalation of the year that is the work is going to happen. So we typically see about $10 million per mile of two-lane roadway today for construction costs. So there's other things that are in there. I just can't pull that all up to share more specifics with you, but I'd be happy. Go ahead.
We understand there are some drainage issues, particularly at the Temple and Gap floodway. However, the city's already allocated, I guess, ACCA federal dollars, $10-15 million for that. So, we were thinking, what other kinds of issues should there be for, other than curb and gutter and raising the median?
So, yeah. So the city does have ARPA funding, and that is going to be that they're using those funds to do there's 4 different drainage basins along that area, and they're constructing or designing and constructing everything that's outside of the Nevada roadway. All the drainage portions that need to go in Nevada would go in with each of these transportation segments.
Is there a significant amount for right-of-way acquisition?
There is not, because most of the right of way is actually already there today.
Okay. Well, it just seems
there is a lot of utility work that needs to happen in there in conjunction with the road. And really, as we put the drainage system in there, if you go and look at it, there's not really much of a drainage system in there today through that whole area, not just on Nevada itself. So the stormwater enterprise will be picking up those areas outside the roadway. We'll be putting the trunk line down Nevada Avenue and tying into those facilities and help with the drainage overall in that whole corridor. There are also some structures in there that are aged that are going to need to be either replaced or significantly rehabbed as we go through the project. But again, if you wanted to provide your contact information, I'd be happy to have a more detailed discussion about the components and the costs associated with that project. Just North Nevada, though, the way it would be constructed, that's one I see happening long-term throughout really the duration of RTA 3 or that next authorization, and potentially even into towards the end of that authorization, just because of this significant amount of rework that needs to happen. And as you are aware, it's an important transportation corridor for us. So it's not like we're going to be able to close it and do the road work. We're going to have maintenance of traffic. So it's actually fairly expensive construction that needs to go on in that area.
Just for basis of comparison, we looked at the cost of CDOT's project for the gap for the 18 miles. And that involved a number of grade separations, obviously 5 or 6, I think, that had to be replaced. And that average cost was about $23 million a mile. So we were, I mean, 1 out of every $5 of the city's allocation of Pprta 3 is being allocated towards this North Nevada project. So it's very large, but I'll send you my contact info.
Yeah, that would be great. And we can have a more global discussion too. Like when you mentioned CDOT's cost, you also have to look at whether it's the construction cost versus the total project cost. So there's a lot of different things, but I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about that in general, Mike.
Okay.
All right, and then the Constitution feasibility study. So that is a project that does have a long history. It was initially identified in the East-West Mobility Study in the early 2000s. It was basically off the table for further consideration really till 2020. The city council's instructions at the time were to preserve the right of way, and it felt like it was still going to be an important corridor, but it really needed to be revisited in the future as transportation volumes dictated. So here we are in 2022, we're going through Connect COS. So yes, Connect COS does assume or recognize that it is going to be important for our transportation network for a couple different reasons. But so looking at the adjacent roadways, just looking at Fillmore alone, right now with the projected volumes, we would need to go through and do widening on Fillmore Road, just 6 lanes. Couple different philosophical things, and Todd, if you want to jump in there. One, if you go and look at Fillmore, it is today, it was an older road. The way land use was done at the time, there's a lot of access points, signalizations, and not very much setback for those businesses for the road. So if you were to go through and do widening in there, even just to do sidewalks in addition multimodal improvements, it's a significant impact to the adjacent land uses. So what do you go and look at? Should be looking at building out the rest of your transportation grid. And that's just really, really where Constitution comes in. The other piece with Constitution is now with the Centennial extension being connected, it's going to tie in at the what's currently labeled as the Fontanero interchange. The intent with if Constitution was to move forward was also to tie in there. So you would truly have a way to get from the east side, the east side up in the foothills of Colorado Springs to the east side as you go looking in that direction. But the feasibility study, there's constraints. We really need to go and look at what makes sense for the alignment and the recommendations on that project. So Connect COS is going to result on having one. Right now, they're proposing a limited access multimodal roadway, basically taking traffic from I-25 to Union and Constitution, where it really ends today. I know it ends at Paseo, but really where it ties into the rest of the transportation system. But with the constraints and the vertical differences and just the impact, it's really important to go through and do a feasibility study. I mean, I really see that happening in twofold. One would be an initial go, no go to make sure that the project could really happen, because there are some constraints that did not exist 20 years ago that are there today that we need to work through. And then there would still be monies if it is determined to be feasible to really go to that next level of planning. That project has the ability to go and capture some other funding or be considered for RT in the future, but it is important to look at it as part of our overall transportation network. Any follow-up questions on that particular one?
Yeah, Gail, on this one. So effectively from a voter's perspective, voters, with this Constitution feasibility study being on the list and what you've shared today, voters should, if they're in favor of connecting Constitution to I-25, should vote yes on this list. If they have problems with that connection, I guess what I'm saying is the Constitution Avenue connection I-25, as you described it, on this list is a fait accompli. In other words, this is not a feasibility study to look at options. This is, in essence, to figure out exactly how, from an engineering perspective, you're going to connect it to I-25.
Yeah, I think it's probably twofold. Yes, the first part is it even possible? If you go and look today, and I'll just give you an example to maybe further that understanding, at the Fontanero exit, the city has a yard right there at Fontanero and Recreation Way. It sits there. The question is that the highest and best use for that property? What would happen to it? Is that the path forward to make this connection? You also have the north arm of the Monument Valley Park, which has a Palmer deed restriction on it. So you can't even go over it. So you've got to look at around it. So there's some technical pieces there that need to be looked at to determine if it's truly feasible. If once you go through that part, you can look at all alternatives, but there really isn't much in the way of alternatives. The intent was really to generally follow the historic rail line. You really have, but there again, there's constraints and there are things you need to work out. So we could advance it to it's more of a conceptual alternative essence for what that road section is going to look like, not necessarily where it's going to go per se. So yeah, I would see that being looked at full flesh from that standpoint. Shoot, you had another portion of what you said at the beginning of it. It's still important for us to look at, and I apologize, Mike, could you restate the first part of your question? I feel like I'm missing a part of it and I wanted to address them in a little bit different order.
In essence, what I was indicating is that this project has a lot of implications for a substantial number of neighborhoods. And those neighborhoods need to be fully aware that this project is on this list. And if it's voter approved, effectively, the direction that you and your department in the city of Colorado Springs would be receiving from the public is that, yes, let's accomplish this project. So if citizens are opposed to the extension of the Constitution to I-25, now is the time for them to speak up.
Well, and then let me back up. This is, now I recall, well, thank you. I appreciate you restating your question and point. With that feasibility study, once you go through the first go to even see if it would be technically possible, there is a huge amount of public engagement that would be involved in. In fact, a large portion of that feasibility would engage the public, and that would really be the opportunity to come and provide input as far as alignment, what the cross sections look like, if there's any cross connections, which is, so that's really where there'd be the time to provide more direct input, as opposed to saying, I don't care what the plan would look like in the future. I don't want to I don't even want to bring it up as a discussion point. What we're really is opening up the opportunity to have a discussion about it, to provide input for it and determine if it's technically feasible.
Okay, thanks for that information. Thanks, Gail.
Yeah, no problem. And then your last one was about Plat Boulder. So we've been discussing this, and in fact, I may change the description on. So what the Plat Boulder improvements entail, we don't actually know the answer to that question yet. Today, we have things that must be done from a state of good repair standpoint. And then there's, if you've looked at or followed it, you're hearing a lot in the press about what's the ultimate transformation or what it could look like. But there's incremental improvements that could happen. And really what would happen if that project ends, there would be a specific round of engagement just on that piece of it. All we're getting from the Platte Avenue Quarter City is a recommendation, but as we brought an engineer on board, there would be another round of public engagement and input to determine what needs to happen there. When I talk about the state of good repair, I'll just mention that cost estimate includes addressing issues on 4 bridges just on Platte Avenue alone. And you may not even realize there are 4 there, but there's the El Paso Bridge, which was struck by a truck last August. We have the Shooks Run Trail Bridge, which is the old rail bridge. We have the Return Road Bridge, and there's actually another bridge that you drive over that goes over Shooks Run. And again, 2 of those bridges have condition issues. So those at a minimum are going to need to be addressed. And there's some other minor things that absolutely need to be addressed from a state of good repair. It's what, if you go and look at it, if you're going to be improving sidewalks, if you're going to be adding dedicated transit lanes, if you're going to change the operation into one way, some of that would still need to be determined as a project moves forward. I think the thing that may be important is the description that was shown up in the voter's guide is that we restate that there would be a public engagement component on that item, just because of where we are and the nature of getting recommendations from our consulting team. One of the other things I'll just mention to you, if you follow this closely, Mike, is that we've been working with the project team, and we're working on setting up a second character workshop for that particular segment. And because of when this corridor study happened, some of these meetings had to happen virtually. What happened with each of the 4 distinct areas, they had these character workshops where individuals were able to come in and work hand in hand with the consultant team and look at alternatives and provide input. And that's what the consultant team has based their transformational recommendation on, that's been drafted or floated around at some of these meetings recently. But what we're realizing, and again, because it had happened virtually, primarily because of COVID, that folks feel like maybe they didn't get the right engagement. So we're looking at having that in person. So folks that live on Platte and Boulder or in the Middle Shooks Run neighborhood, or even go through, happen to commute for, they're going to have another opportunity to come in and provide input to the project team. So we're actually going to take a small step back on that just to receive additional input from where we are today.
Gail, is that going to be completed in time before the ballot question is set, though?
It will.
In the list?
I believe that it's going to be completed. We're actually working on the scheduling and discussing right now with with the city councilors in that area, just some as kind of the options to open it back up for additional input. So I would anticipate the character workshop happening. I don't know where we would be recommendations ultimately with the consultant teams. My guess is they would have some additional input. But again, regardless of what comes from our consultant team, if that project comes to fruition, there would be a public engagement component on the actual project and what's going to be scoped for construction in the future.
Okay, I obviously, I still have concerns, and members of our organization have concerns about, moving forward with the $55 million cost and not knowing exactly what that, whether it's BRT or it's a plat boulder one-way couplet or I mean, voters should be concerned about that in general. So, but hopefully that will get worked out in time before this goes to the ballot.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Richard.
Gail, I may not have understood this correctly, but I have read some things in the paper about Platt Avenue. And if I have it correctly, there are those that feel that Platt should be a one-way avenue versus both directions. Am I correct?
That is correct. And if you, in the transformational option that's being discussed, Platt would be one way in the eastbound direction and Boulder would be one way in the westbound direction.
Okay.
For a portion of
I'm
it.
not that familiar with Boulder, but I am with Platt. And I normally try to speak as little as possible on city projects as I represent El Paso County, but this is a regional organization. And transportation and highways have been my career. In my traveling around the portions of the city, particularly going east and west, there are not many good east-west connections. And I would say that even today, Platt Avenue is one of the finest connections we have as an east-west connection. And maybe if it's Boulder is included, maybe that will work even better. I don't know. I've never thought about that. I don't know that it's my job to. But I will tell you that as far as Platt is concerned, unless somebody would show me something different, I would do everything I could to try to convince the city to keep Platt two directions and make improvements. It is already a very fine east-west connection, but it can be improved. There's no question. And that's the end of my comments.
And I think it's fair to say that there's a range of alternatives. One of the things, that both connects COS and the Platte Corridor City looks at is the traffic volumes and more developments happening to the east and how where jobs are going to be located and the commuting patterns. And I know if you've followed Connect COS, I follow that. So the one problem with Platte, if you're going to do improvements, you can't really add much width one way or the other way. You're adding a dedicated transit way, a bike way, improving sidewalks, any of those kinds of things from our transportation mode without having a hugely significant impact to the existing citizens. So the team has looked at, out of the box, really thinking of all the tools that are available to them from a transportation standpoint. So this is one of the reasons why it's in the conversation, to be able to address traffic volumes now, actually reduce the impacts on the citizens on the Platte side. Does it have the opposite effect on the Boulder side? Somewhat, but that would still be buffered and changed as well if they look at this. But I think it's still important to have the conversation. And if folks like Mike and others that are in that area come to this character workshop, I actually think it gets a little bit better understanding of what that could look like and just options. But at the same time, provide input. If there's things that we don't know or we're missing, doesn't make sense, or there's another option, then we'd be open to that as well. So I appreciate those comments, Richard.
And I would add that as a participant in that Platte Avenue corridor study, there are a lot of options that were brought forward and looked at, and all of them that worked its way through that had the impact on the public, the residents, and that stuff in mind. And there's been lots of public engagement to include one in each city council district. And Platte is unique in that it has 4 distinct characteristics. From far out east is entirely different than down through Shooks Run and down through that area. And so one solution doesn't fit all in there in order to maintain the character of that neighborhood and the stuff. So I back what Gail said is the team has done an awesome job of looking at alternatives, and they've left very few stones unturned in terms of what best suits those neighborhoods and what the public needs are and what the public desires in those neighborhoods. So, okay. Thank you for your comments and input, Mike. I appreciate it. All right, let's move on if there's no more questions on that and go to item 7C, PPRT 3 draft ballot issue. Rick, you gonna? Oh, yes, I guess we do thank you, Larry. Do I have a motion to make a favorable recommendation to the board on the member governments list that were presented to us today?
I'll also move if no one else will.
Okay, Richard, thank you.
I would second that.
All right, Dave, second. Thank you. Thanks, Joan. All right, so all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Who was aye?
Rick,
Are you, is that a nay, Rick?
that is correct.
Okay. Yeah, just one nay, so motion carries. We'll bring that up. All right. All right, let's go to 7C, ballot language.
Okay, we now have a draft ballot issue language to look at. Jess, if you can scroll up or down. There you go. Okay, so the 3 or 4 key elements here. The first one is the first line, without increasing taxes. Shall the existing 0.55 of a penny, and then line 4 be extended. So that's similar to the wording in 2017 when we went to the voters and asked for the $10 million for the gap, or for the portion of the gap that's in El Paso County. Of course, this doesn't have the capital project list on it yet, so this is the narrative without the projects. Then on the next page, I'd like to highlight, we have the same wording in the first line of the second page, without priority, with priority A projects being completely funded prior to the use of funding on priority B projects. That's been consistent. However, we added in this came out of the matrix discussion, that however, that priority A projects shall not be required to be completely funded prior to use on funding on priority B projects for the project listed above, in the event that any projects are prohibited due to state or federal law or regulations, acts of, or failures to take action by judicial, legislative, or regulatory authorities, or other force majeure events. So that was that came out of the matrix discussion, to have a mulligan or a wild card to play, so that we'd be asking the voters if there was, for example, there was a state law or federal law or a judge said, no, you can't do that, you can't do this A project, but we're ready to move to the B list, that we could move to the B list if the voters approve this additional wording that what has been added. And then the last couple lines, we have the same revenue limit, Tabor exclusion without limitation by revenue spending limits of Article 10, Section 20 of the Colorado Constitution. So that's where we, if the voters approve that, we do not have an annual Tabor revenue limit. So, questions?
Anybody online, any comments?
This is Ann in Green Mountain Falls. I just wondered, the disclaimer, is that because of the changes in the federal regulations that were made by executive order? As far as equitable distribution of funds, and I don't know what's going on. It's really kind of strange.
I don't think it's because of anything known specifically now. It's a wild card to play additional wording to allow the member governments to move to the B list if a state or federal reg or a judge or something else says we can't do member X's project number 3 on A list. If a judge did say that, then none of the 6 member governments could move to the B list. So this is just a contingency.
It's an escape
for something that might or might not happen. But if it happens, we're stuck and we can't move from the A to the B.
So it's, for instance, if we get denied doing a project that's a capacity increase from clean greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
We can't do that project. So that's kind of what an example.
Okay, well,
And
that's kind of thought we never had to do that before. So it's something new.
Larry and then Joan.
I think Jennifer Ivy, the attorney, has taken into consideration, some of our concerns about the lack of flexibility between the A list and the B list on Pprta 2. And with this wording, she has given us, as Rick says, more flexibility if something happens with a particular project, to where everybody doesn't get held up. We can still continue to move on. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 10, 12 years. So this gives us more flexibility than has been in PPR A1 and 2.
And that has been a problem in the past. I didn't realize that.
Well, it's been an issue. The issue has come up quite a few times as far as whether we could get, to the B list. And so this is why the attorney has written it this way, to give us a little bit more flexibility in case something does happen. We haven't run into a problem before, but you just never know. And it'd be much better to have a little bit of flexibility if something does come up, to where we can move between the A and the B list without holding all the entities that are in Pprta 2 and 3 to just the A list.
Well, that makes sense. I just thought I would inquire. Thank you.
Go ahead, Joan.
Joan.
Are you ready for a motion?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute, hold on.
Oh, can I add 2 things or questions I would like to spin forward? I just want to make sure, and this is more directed at Rick, that the regional projects, the regional A-list projects will be listed at the top of the ballot and then go into the individual member government projects, similar to how it was done for Pprta 2.
Yes, that's the plan.
Okay, and then 2, under the A-list in that last bullet point where it says the include local funding for, I want to make sure that we're striking the local funding for, it's just the program as we've described it, and we've been including on our list is the state and federal discretionary grant match program.
That's my intent. That's my intent. I'll pay attention to that when we
Okay.
see a draft.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, John?
Mr. Chair, I would move a positive recommendation for the PPRTA 3 draft ballot language as presented.
Scott? And Scott second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries for a positive recommendation. Thank you. Item 7D, quarterly reports from member governments. That's an information. The updates are in your packet. A lot of work by staff putting these things together, and a lot of very useful information in here for us and the people we interact with on a daily basis. So any questions on any of that?
I just have one real quick one.
Okay.
There was one out there, help or support for fire station 21. Is that for signals and cutouts and that sort of thing?
Who's that in the cities?
Yes.
What page is that on, Rick?
I don't have it available to me, so I don't know it. It's one of the things listed was a support for fire station 21. And I was just wondering if that was stoplights or cutouts or what it was.
It's a,
Rick, this is Gail Sturdivant. I don't know that I have the answer for that one off the top of my head, and it doesn't look like Todd Frisbee's still on, so I could get that information to you offline.
Yeah, that'd be fine, because I wanted to talk to you anyhow, if you would give me a call.
Okay.
Why don't we do it this way? Why don't I get you the information when I get back on my copy, because I don't have a copy of the whole
Yeah.
packet.
That would be great if you could tell me where you're seeing that. My guess is on one of the traffic signal programs or intersection improvements. I just don't know what that one is off the top of my head, Rick.
I'll look it up, and when we talk, I'll give it to you. Thanks.
All right. Item 7E, City of Colorado Springs monthly change order acquisition. Any comments, questions, concerns about that information only item? Seeing none. Item 7F for the county's change order request. Any questions for Josh? All right, seeing none. Thank you. Item number 8, administrative action boards. Rick?
just a highlight from my memo that's in the packet, number 12, that the board's state legislative lobbyist Andrew Land recorded that House Bill 1062 had been killed in committee. Remember, that was the one that was going to eliminate sales tax on prepared food and potentially could cost the PPRTA, of course, to be a benefit for a lot of citizens, but it could have cost the PPRTA $30 to $40 million a year. Any other questions about my memo?
Okay, seeing none online, thank you. Any agenda topics for next meeting? Anything that's burning that you want to have someone look up and talk about? Anybody online? Okay. Item 10, communications. Is there any information that one of the members would like to present, Larry?
I've talked to Jim about this. I will not be able to be present for the July meeting, both the CAG and the board meeting. I will be sailing down a river in Europe. This has been something that was scheduled since 2020 and has been canceled I think it's either 3 or 4 times because of COVID. And I actually got an email last night saying that we are on, we are
Alright.
going. So just to let everyone know that I will not be at the July meeting of both the CAG and the board meeting.
And you're gonna be in what country?
Several different countries.
All right, well, I'll drink a good German beer for you. Great. Anyone else, Gail?
Mr. Chair, City of Colorado Springs has 2 things we'd like to share with the CAC. The first is a reminder, if you haven't seen the invitation already, I hope you have, but there is a ribbon cutting for the Airport Road over Spring Creek opening on June 9th at 2 p.m. So hopefully you can, if you're available, you're able to attend. It's located in the Korean Baptist Church there adjacent to the project sites where it will be held. And then the other thing, I want to share some good news. You'll probably see it on the news tonight. The city found out officially last night that we did get the Chrissy grant. It is the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements Grant for the Nevada, Tejon, and Shooks Run bridges. So it only covers preliminary engineering and NEPA, but this is the first major step in a bigger program that we've laid out for the feds. So even though it's a smaller dollar amount, we're very excited about it, and we're excited to be able to leverage PPRT's dollars and your support to bring federal fundings into our community.
Awesome. Great news. Great news. That's those bridges definitely need replacement. Rick?
I have a supply of 2022 annual reports if anybody wants to grab a handful on their way out.
All right. Anybody, last chance? Anybody online? Nope. All right, not seeing one. So we'll just call this meeting over. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.